The moment the teenager opened his mouth, the air in the courtroom snapped, sharp, sudden, electric. He leaned back in his seat, designer hoodie draped over him like armor, and with a lazy smirk delivered the words nobody expected to hear out loud. Why is he even here? He's useless. For a full heartbeat, the room froze. A woman in the back gasped. A man turned slowly toward the frail veteran sitting in the front row, hands folded over a worn cane, eyes lowered with the quiet dignity of a man who'd seen more than anyone there could imagine. Judge Caprio stopped mid-sentence. His glasses dipped just enough for his widened eyes to send a shockwave through the silence. Not anger, not outrage, just disbelief, so sharp it cut the air in half. The teen didn't flinch. He thought he owned the room. If you're a Caprio fan, hit subscribe, because what happened next flipped this kid's world upside down. Long before that insult echoed across the courtroom, the tension had been building like a storm waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The case itself was small, a minor traffic violation, the kind rich families erase with a check and a phone call. But today was different. Today, his mother's influence wasn't in the room. Today, he had to answer for himself. And instead of remorse, he showed up with an attitude sharpened by privilege, convinced that consequences were for other people. Across the aisle sat the veteran. He had come only as a witness, expecting nothing more than a simple civic duty. He arrived early, dressed neatly, gripping his cane with hands that had weathered war, sacrifice, and cold nights that still haunted him. To him, this hearing was routine. To the teen, it was an inconvenience interrupting his perfectly curated online life. But the insult changed everything. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a slap in the face to every immigrant parent working double shifts, every veteran who sacrificed in silence, every elder whose wisdom was dismissed by a generation glued to screens. And the courtroom felt it. America felt it. What began as a simple hearing had transformed into a collision of entitlement versus sacrifice, a reminder that values aren't inherited, they're earned. As Judge Caprio leaned forward, the room braced itself. Everyone sensed this moment was only the beginning. Long before he tossed that cruel word, the teenager lived in a world built to convince him he could do no wrong. His life began behind iron gates, in a mansion where the halls echoed with money, not love. Staff tiptoed around him. A chef prepared meals he barely acknowledged. Parents were present in photos, but rarely in person. At school, rules bent for him. Late assignments? Accepted. Detentions? Erased. Fights? Just boys being boys. Each escape from responsibility hardened his belief, nothing can touch me. Online, he crafted a persona of arrogance. Designer shoes, exotic vacations, fake confidence. He mocked people with less, called elders irrelevant, and once filmed himself laughing at a janitor sweeping the hall. His friends applauded. No one corrected him. By 16, he carried himself like royalty, untouchable, unapologetic, unchallenged. So when he entered Judge Caprio's courtroom, he didn't walk in like a nervous teenager. He slouched in like a prince, assuming the kingdom was his. He barely glanced at the veteran. To him, the man represented everything he dismissed: age, humility, sacrifice. But the courtroom was different. Here, money couldn't shield him. Influence couldn't soften consequences. And for the first time in his life, his words would actually cost him something. When he said useless, he didn't just cross a line. He ignited his own downfall. Long before that insult hit him, the veteran's life had been shaped by battles the boy could never imagine. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood, raised by immigrant parents who taught him that dignity isn't about status. It's about how you show up for the world. He enlisted not for glory, but for a future. He served through sleepless nights, freezing terrain, and moments where a single second meant life or death. He survived ambushes, he survived loss, he survived memories that still woke him at night. When he returned home, he lived quietly, never asking for praise. He mentored young immigrants, volunteered at community centers, and carried himself with the kind of humility that speaks louder than any speech. So when the insult struck, he didn't lash out. He simply lowered his gaze, not out of shame, but out of wisdom. He had heard far worse in war. He understood that loud voices often come from small hearts. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was strength in its purest form. And Judge Caprio knew it. Judge Caprio leaned forward, the weight of the insult still hanging in the air. "Young man," he said, voice steady but edged with steel, "would you like to explain why you felt the need to speak to him that way?" The teen shrugged, rolling his eyes. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Old people get in the way. He's slow. He's irrelevant." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. A woman shook her head. A man whispered, "Unbelievable." Even the court officer shifted, but the veteran remained still. The judge repeated the word, slowly, deliberately. "Irrelevant?" The boy smirked, emboldened. "Yeah, people like him hold everything back. We're the future. He's the past." For the first time, the veteran's eyes lifted, not angry, but disappointed. A look that carried more weight than any shout ever could. Judge Caprio's expression hardened. His next words were a verbal scalpel. "Son, I think you're about to learn just how wrong you are." And the entire courtroom leaned forward, because the real lesson was about to begin. The courtroom was thick with tension. Judge Caprio rose slowly, his movements measured, deliberate, as though each step was calculated to ensure his words would land with the full weight of justice. Silence swept over the room, the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm, with every eye fixed on him. For a moment, it seemed as if he was searching for the right words. But it wasn't hesitation. It was the calm before the storm of truth. "Let me make something clear, young man." Judge Caprio's voice was calm but carried authority. "What you just said, that wasn't just disrespect. That was a denial of everything this country stands for." The teenager shifted uncomfortably, his smugness beginning to crack under the weight of the judge's words. But Caprio wasn't finished. "You see," he continued, "there's a difference between thinking you're entitled to everything and understanding that everything worth having is earned. This veteran you so casually dismissed, he earned his right to be here more times over than you can ever imagine. He didn't inherit his life, he fought for it. And for every person who's ever laid down their life to defend this nation, he represents the reason you get to sit in that seat today." The teenager opened his mouth, but a sharp glance from the judge silenced him. "Let's get one thing straight. You think he's irrelevant? You think his sacrifice doesn't matter?" Caprio's voice grew stronger now, the words coming faster, building momentum. "You're standing in the very courtroom that was built by people like him, people who came before you, who fought for the freedoms you take for granted. And you, with all your privilege and entitlement, have the audacity to call him useless?" The boy's bravado crumbled. He shifted in his seat, now visibly rattled. The judge's words pierced through his defenses like a knife through paper. No one in the room was on his side anymore. The silence now felt like an oppressive weight, as though even the air itself had turned against him. Caprio's voice softened, but its impact was undeniable. "What you fail to understand is that what makes a person truly valuable is not what they have or how loud they can yell about it. It's about what they've given. And this man..." Caprio nodded toward the veteran, his voice now filled with respect. "Like this man has given more than you could ever fathom. His sacrifice made it possible for you to live in the comfort you enjoy today. And that comfort isn't a given. It's the product of service, of duty, of selflessness. You don't get to mock that." The veteran, still as ever, sat with his hands folded neatly in his lap. But in that moment, he wasn't just a man who had served. He was a symbol of everything the teenager had dismissed, everything he'd never bothered to understand. And the boy, for the first time, felt the weight of that realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Caprio's voice grew quieter, almost a whisper, but it carried through the room with the power of a thunderclap. Now, you're going to leave here today with more than just a lesson in respect, son. You're going to learn that entitlement doesn't protect you. Actions do. The teenager's arrogance had evaporated. A rare look of discomfort, of self-doubt, spread across his face, a feeling he had never known before. The shift in the room was palpable, because this wasn't just about a courtroom anymore. It was about an entire generation learning that real value is never earned through disrespect. And with that, Caprio delivered the final blow, the sentence that would change everything. The courtroom doors swung open, and the outside world erupted. Judge Caprio's sentencing went viral in an instant, spreading like wildfire across social media. Hashtags like Respect Our Veterans, Dignity Over Entitlement, and Caprio Justice began trending within minutes, as millions watched the clip of the teenager's fall from privilege. On Twitter, the firestorm ignited. "This kid got what he deserved," one tweet read, shared by veterans groups across the nation. "The judge said what we've all been thinking. Time to put entitlement in its place." Celebrities, athletes, and commentators weighed in. The outrage was palpable, but so was the overwhelming praise for Judge Caprio. One former soldier posted, "I've been waiting for this moment. It's time to stop letting the privileged disrespect our heroes. Caprio did it right." Meanwhile, the teen's parents issued a statement, a fragile attempt to salvage their son's tarnished image. "We support the judge's decision," they claimed, but their words felt empty, hollow. Everyone knew it was about damage control. Behind closed doors, frantic phone calls between their lawyers took place. For once, their wealth couldn't smooth things over. The image of their son's arrogance couldn't be erased with a check. The true ripple effect was felt across the younger generation. Teens who had once followed the boy's every post began to question what they had once celebrated. Memes flooded the internet. One, showing the rich kid's smirk turned upside down, read, "When your privilege meets reality." It spread across Instagram and TikTok, collecting millions of views. The boy became the face of entitlement and a cautionary tale. At the Veterans Center, where the teen had been sentenced to serve 100 hours of community work, the mood was different. The staff greeted him with quiet expectation, a knowing look in their eyes. He was about to hear stories, real stories, that would shift his worldview forever. The shockwaves of that day weren't just confined to social media. They reached deeper into conversations at dinner tables, in schools and living rooms across the country. And in the end, the young man would learn far more than just a lesson in humility. He would learn that some lessons can only be earned. Weeks passed, and the teenager's time at the Veterans Center became a quiet awakening. He arrived reluctantly, his pride still clinging to him like a second skin. But the more time he spent listening to the veterans, really listening, the more his bravado dissolved. He saw the faces of men and women who had given everything for a country that, for many, had turned its back on them. He heard their stories, the ones who had lost everything in battle, the ones who lived with the weight of grief, the ones who returned home only to find that their sacrifices weren't always appreciated. But there was something else he saw, dignity. Despite the hardships they had faced, despite the wounds they carried, there was a quiet strength in these veterans that made him feel small in comparison. They had fought for honor, for country, for freedom, not for the recognition that he had always sought. He began to understand that the true measure of a person isn't found in wealth, social media followers, or the loudest voice in the room. It's found in the sacrifices we make for others, in the respect we give those who came before us, and in the humility we embrace when we realize how little we actually know. Judge Caprio's sentence wasn't just a punishment. It was a chance for the young man to learn something greater than his own entitlement. He learned that true value comes not from what you have, but from what you give. And in that moment, something changed in him. He would never look at the world the same way again. The courtroom drama that day didn't just change a teenager's life, it reshaped the conversation across America. For those who watched, for those who listened, it wasn't just a viral moment. It was a lesson in respect, humility, and the true meaning of sacrifice. Judge Caprio's wisdom didn't just bring justice, it sparked a nationwide reckoning about entitlement, privilege, and the values we choose to uphold as a society. The teenager, once cloaked in arrogance, learned that the loudest voices are not always the most valuable. He learned that dignity isn't about money or status. It's about service, sacrifice, and the quiet strength of those who have fought for others, often at the cost of their own peace. And though the boy's journey had only just begun, it was a turning point, a moment where he began to see the world with clearer eyes. But what about the rest of us? What about you, watching right now? Do you feel the weight of this moment? Do you understand what this moment represents? This is more than just a story about a rich kid and a veteran. It's about all of us. It's about how we treat those who came before us. It's about how we show up for each other, not with arrogance or entitlement, but with gratitude and respect. Because the world doesn't owe us anything. It's what we give to it that counts. If you believe in dignity over hate, if you believe in justice over privilege, then you need to be part of this movement. Share this video. Let's make sure that stories like this are told. Let's make sure we lift up the voices of those who serve, those who sacrifice, and those who remind us of what truly matters. If you're inspired by this story, hit that subscribe button. Join the conversation. We're just getting started, and together we can make sure these lessons aren't forgotten. Stand with us. Stand with dignity. Stand with justice. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the quietest voices, and it's up to us to make sure they're heard.